Therefore, on the side of the externals that are required, it should be a matter of suitability as well. The suitability means what? You're receiving God, therefore your posture, your attitude, what you're doing, how you behave in relationship to Him should have that same thing in mind. In other words, this is why the church has said it always should be receiving communion kneeling. Why? Because Christ said, before me, every knee shall bow. Every knee shall bow, right? This is one of the reasons why when the Blessed Sacrament was exposed, the church in the past always did a double genuflection, so to indicate that there is a recognition that before Him, both knees have to go to the floor, right? Then there's, of course, the question of receiving it. Why can't I receive it in the hand? Well, it has to do with several things, but part of it, the reason you receive it on the tongue and not in the hand, is the hand is not consecrated in the layman in any manner that would make it a suitable organ of reception of communion. So then people say, well, what the tongue doesn't receive anything, and actually that's not true. Historically, they dropped it in the new rite, but in the old rite, what they would actually do is during their baptism, they would take exercised salt and place it on the tongue and actually say, may this be the foretaste of the heavenly food. In other words, they were basically exercising the tongue in order to make it a fit reception, organ of reception of communion at the time of the baptism. That was the whole point behind that. And unfortunately, that's been lost. People don't seem to grasp that. The fact is that we have an obligation to kneel before Him in the reception of it. I mean, the church can say you don't have to. That's their place to say it. But in the end, if you're talking about what's suitable, we really should kneel for the reception of communion. He was the only one that knelt down in church, and the priest started chastising him. And he says, what do you think, you're special? You think you're different from everybody else, that you have to kneel? And he just said, no, it's precisely because I realize I'm unworthy that I'm kneeling. Of course, the priest is flabbergasted. You know, I'm worse than everybody else. That's why I'm kneeling. He didn't have any response for it. Standing is not an act of reverence. Standing is an act of testimony, liturgically speaking. And so in relationship to the Eucharist, it's a matter of reverence. In the case of reverence, we take the position of recognizing that we are lowly and God is condescending to us, from the priest to us, in reception of it. And a lot of priests today, basically, I think that there's reasons why they're pushing for that is they don't believe it. They don't believe in the real presence. And or if they do believe in the real presence, their attitude towards God is appalling. There's no fear of offending God whatsoever. There's no fear of the Lord. And you can see that by the way they handle the Eucharist. They'll just reach in and grab and just start tossing stuff around, and etc. They're very sloppy about being careful with the Blessed Sacrament. They don't care that there's fragments of the host all over the place, etc. And those are usually the guys that are most vociferous about standing, etc. And that's just a sign that they themselves lack reverence. The position of the slave is on the knees with the hands folded, because the hands folding is a form of petition. Okay, so the point being is that we need to do that for our sake. Most people are unaware of the fact that the communion rail is actually an altar. It's not just a dividing line between the sacred and the profane, which it is. It's actually the altar upon which the people complete their sacrifice. In other words, the priest offers the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ in reparation for our sins and in atonement for our sins at the altar, at the high altar, right? But the lay people, that's his sacrifice. But the lay people also offer a sacrifice. So their sacrifice becomes efficacious when they join their sacrifices, when they offer up their prayers, sufferings, and good works in union with the sacrifice of the priest, which is the sacrifice of Calvary, because none of our sacrifices have any efficacy unless it's joined to Christ's sacrifice. So if they join it to the priest, they do that during Mass. So that's their offertory, joining it to them, sacrificing themselves in relationship to it. Then when the priest comes down, the completion of their sacrifice is done at the communion rail, which is an altar where the sacrifice is completed, where they receive Holy Communion.